This is Again for the First Time with your host, Darren Redmond.
Hello, everybody. This is Darren Redmond with Again for the First Time, and we are so privileged today. We only have him for a limited amount of time to meet with the chief White House correspondent of Today News Africa out of Washington, Simon Ateba. How are you today, sir?
Doing great, Darren. Thank you for having me.
Well, thank you for finding some time today to meet with us. There was so many questions, and I researched before we start our podcast, and you're just somebody who seems to be doing everything right. And what is going on with you and the White House press secretary? You wrote something very glowing on your Twitter feed a few days ago about don't separate the two, or remember to separate the two, business and social. But Bring us up to date, because your voice needs to be heard.
Yeah, so it's been crazy, it's about the job. As journalists, our job is to ask tough questions. Our job is not to become friends with the press secretary or the president. I said something on Twitter a few days ago that most people come to Washington, D.C., including journalists, trying to drain the swamps. But when they get to Washington, D.C., they become so comfortable, and they also become part of the elite. They fly with the president on Air Force One, they attend dinner, they go to yoga classes, and so Washington, D.C. is attractive. To go to happy hours and drink champagne, and everything seems to be beautiful. And so now it becomes difficult for them to ask the tough questions, to do the real investigations, to challenge the people in power, to hold them to account. Because if they do that, they become they embarrass their friends, and now they don't want to invite them to their circle, and they don't want to do that. So what they do is they become just part of the elite, but the people who are watching them from home begin to realize that, they are no more doing the job they were sent to Washington, D.C. to do, and people turn their backs on them, and now they are shocked that people don't watch them anymore. People don't listen to them anymore. And people are watching people like Tucker Carlson. Or even they are surprised that someone like President Trump has just won the presidential election. How can it be? He's not part of the elite. He can't win the election, so it might be the Russians. No, let's start an investigation to prove that the Russian came to the US and rigged the election for Trump. And so they don't understand those things. And for doing my job at the White House, for asking the tough questions, for trying to do investigation and trying to build relations between the US and Africa through reliable and accurate information, I'm being censored at the White House and being silenced by the press secretary. And just to conclude on this, maybe the last thing I will say for now is just imagine you being the press secretary of President Biden. Right. And your president is hosting 50 African leaders in Washington, D.C., as he did last December during the second U.S.-Africa.
I remember that.
And the African journalist who covers the White House is not called on during your press briefing to ask questions on the summit, even though that's his main bit. That's the main.
That's when I first became aware of you, and I was like, this does not resonate with me, and I don't care what people's political affiliations are, but how do you have a situation where you're speaking from a place of understanding, a place generationally? Somebody needs to look you up and what you've gone through, and in terms of being held captive and some of the things that you've done, and not ask you a question, not allow your voice to be heard. And here's the one thing I want to ask, and I want to tell you what I was most disappointed with. The press secretary is a grown-up, and you and the press secretary can have words and agree to disagree. I think you hit on it. I was disappointed bordering on disgusted with the way that your fellow news reporters lashed out at you. Because how dare they
Yes.
get on top of you for asking a question?
Yes, and that's why I said like a few minutes ago, right? You come to Washington, D.C., you want to do the job. You're a journalist, you have all these tough questions. You want people to get the benefits from the people that they send to Washington, D.C. to do the job for them. And now when you get to Washington, D.C., everything becomes so comfortable. You join this group. The White House briefing room is a small place. It has 49 seats, and some people like myself often stand when we don't have, since I don't have a permanent seat. And you become comfortable with, the comfort, the drinks, the wine, the proximity to power. The Secret Service opens the door for you when you come to the White House. It's a beautiful place. Even the air you breathe is beautiful. And now you're afraid of losing that. So what you do when someone comes to the briefing room and begins to ask those questions, you become a bit jealous. And now you want to protect the press secretary. You want to protect the president. You're now conniving with the people in power and go against, your fellow journalists instead of doing the job. Listen, Darren, it's about the job.
Yes.
Our job is to ask questions. Our job is to do the job. The American people and the American allies sent us to Washington, D.C. to do. It's not about being friends with the press secretary. It's not about trying to make money. It's not about, becoming comfortable, going for massages and spa and, and yoga classes and all those things. Once you do that in Washington, D.C., you lose it. You no longer work for the people, and now you attack your fellow colleagues.
And what they don't understand generally, and we can't speak for everybody, is they forget what got them there. And that's the good hard work, asking the important questions and just doing the job. And it just, you see this in corporate America, unfortunately, you see this throughout the world. And that's once they get there, they all of a sudden forget what got them there, and they just try to stay where they are. And again, not speaking about everybody. I know we have a short amount of time. I want to ask you about the Sudan. What's going on right now? Because it's
terrible. What's happening in Sudan? Since April 15, there's been a war. It's power, a struggle for power between the Sudanese armed forces, SAF, and what they call the support, the rapid support forces, like the rebels. And all I will say about that is hundreds of people have died. A lot of Americans are still there. They can't leave the country. They are trapped. President Biden has evacuated the U.S. Embassy in Khartoum, the personnel at the U.S. Embassy in Khartoum, but there are still many Americans who are there, who are trapped and who are unable to come back. And it's almost like Afghanistan 2.0, right? Where you evacuate the military first, and then now the people are left behind. And, there are 16,000 Americans who are registered in Sudan. The State Department claims that most of them are dual citizens and they don't want to come back to the US. But when there's war, everyone wants to leave. When people can no longer leave, you need to ensure the rescue of your people, which the State Department didn't do. Blinken, the Secretary of State, has failed in Africa. And all I want to say more generally about the war in Sudan, it shows you how the US influence in Africa is waning.
Thank you.
Last month, what's it called? The State Department official went to Sudan, and they had no idea, at least officially, they had no idea that a war was going to break out very soon. They didn't know anything, even with.
How was that surprise? How can you allow war to surprise you? Where are your boots on the ground? Where's your intelligence? And again, I don't care what political party anybody's from.
Yeah.
But how does this happen? And I have to tell you, Simon, as the son, my father's passed, of a dual citizen, I hear everything that you're saying and resonate. And how dare somebody just assume, since they're a dual citizen,
Yeah,
they're
yeah.
happy.
Yeah, exactly. They said, you know, they don't want to come back. And so what happens is, you know, what you want is you realize that the US influence in Africa and around the world is waning. For instance, the Secretary of State and even the White House called on Sudanese, you know, forces to, you know, maintain a ceasefire. They did not. Actually, they attacked a US convoy. The EU representative was also assaulted at home. It's a real mess. Americans are trapped. They can't come back. Now the US is relying on Saudi Arabia and other allies to now get the American citizen out of, you know, Sudan, and it's a real mess.
Well, before I let you go, I just want to ask you, I mean, what's next for you? I know you're still fighting the fight. Has that cleared up at all a little bit, or is it getting worse?
So now I'm on a 2-week break to complete my book. You know, I'm just because
which I will be getting, and I'll be talking about here.
Thanks. And it's always good to put this thing in writing, right? Where people who come after us, you see, this is our time. In the next maybe 50 years, maybe none of us will be here, maybe 50, 60, 100, I don't know how long we still have. And, you know, you talked about dual citizenship. It doesn't really matter. All those things, in the end, you are here. You need to do all the good that you can do right here. And that's why when I came to the US, I realized that there wasn't a medium really focusing on US-Africa relations. And I saw how China was rising and other nations were rising. I have nothing against China, but maybe there's a big problem with the CCP. And I realized that US influence was waning in Africa. And we decided to, you know, focus on US-Africa relations. So
here's what I'm going to say before I let you go about something you said, because it just resonates with me. Opinion. I feel that, unfortunately, because of the media and just because of American culture, people are more aware of China and TikTok and whether it should be on people's phones than that people are dying in the Sudan and can't get out.
Yeah, exactly. People are dying in the Sudan. The Sudanese are dying. The Americans are strapped. One of them has already died. It's a mess. All I want to tell the people who are watching me now is to keep praying for me.
Amen.
Pray for me. Go to my Twitter handle at Simon Ateba, SIMONATEBA, and follow me, subscribe, and go to our Substack, simonateba.substack.com, and subscribe, follow us, support us in any way you can. I will keep doing my job. I will keep asking the tough questions. I will keep writing. I will keep, you know, doing investigative report and trying to bring the truth to the American people and the American allies in Africa.
Thank you for everything that you're doing, and keep up the great work. Stay safe, my friend, and we'll talk again soon. Bye now.
Thank you so much.